I'm here with Brian Schrager, Jerusalem Journal, and the Chaim Report?
The Chaim Report.
Chaim Report.
Yeah.
Great news update, and of course Bill Koenig of Watch.org, a longtime friend. And let's just talk a little bit about what's going on. We're standing down here at the promenade in Jerusalem, and you can see the Temple Mount in the background. Below that is the city of David. Brian, you live here. You live in Bethlehem, so give us a little bit of the lay of the land.
Well, what we're seeing right now, you can obviously see the Temple Mount and the Golden Dome sitting right on top of what most regard as the Holy of Holies. And then on this side of the Temple Mount is called the Holy Gate, and it's blocked right now, but that's where worshipers went up to worship at the temple. And there's a spit of land. It's like a V that comes out right on this side of the Temple Mount. That's where the city of David was located.
So what we're looking at is we can see the southern wall of the Temple Mount.
We're seeing the southern wall of the Temple Mount. We're viewing this from the south, looking north. So you can see how the hills of Jerusalem surrounded the old city and protected it, the original city of David. And then to our left, you see how Jerusalem is built up. To the right is the Mount of Olives. You can see the biggest steeple there is one possible place of the ascension of Jesus. The thing to the left, the far left, the tower on the far left, that's Hebrew University. That's not a cross on the top of it. It looks like a cross, but it isn't. And then directly in front of us, going down into the valley here, is an Arab village. And in fact, out of this village is where a number of terrorists came during the somewhat recent so-called knife car intifada, in which a number of Israelis were stabbed, run down by cars over about, a 15, 16-month time period.
Right. In fact, where we are is the promenade, and I'll pan around here. And up on top of the promenade here is where about 4 months ago or so, 2 or 3 Israeli soldiers were in a group, and a truck drove down through. I played the video of it on my prophecy update.
Yeah, it happened right here.
It was a terrorist attack. Happened right here. Was it on a Sunday?
I think so.
I think so. It was after Shabbat.
Yeah.
And they were out on a heritage tour or whatever to see sites.
Yeah, the IDF will gives orientation to their soldiers. They take them all around Israel and show them the history of the place where they live. Yeah, and they were here doing that. It's kind of a vacation day, if you will, a paid vacation day, to come and see Jerusalem the way King David saw it himself when he first laid eyes upon the place.
And actually, what I've learned recently is that in the city of David, in the area of David's palace that's been excavated, is a number of years ago, and archaeologists don't talk about that. You need to understand that there's an agenda. And after the war in 1948 and the creation of the State of Israel, most of what we call biblical archaeologists are secularists, and they changed the orientation. The people who actually believed that the Bible was the roadmap were shoved aside, and people like Kathleen Kenyon started with, my personal opinion, is this demonic teaching that the Jews had never occupied the mountains of Israel at the time of the conquest or after the time of the conquest of Joshua, and if they did, they were a very small person. And I've seen her charts, like at Jericho, where she says this is the burn layer, and the mud brick walls at the top collapsed inward. She says that it's an earthquake. Now, she died 40 years ago, but she changed. In her original notes, it says mud brick collapse, and she documents it, writes it into her charts and drawings, and she changed it. She said, well, it was an earthquake. But in an earthquake, the walls will move back and forth and not fall all around the city where they've dug. At Jericho, the walls fell inward. And there's also clearly outside of that, you can see a burn layer all throughout the tell at Jericho. Now, we were there yesterday, and it was amazing that of all the people, there were dozens and dozens of buses at the Temptation Cafe, to 8. And on the other side of the parking lot is the Tell of Jericho, where the walls fell. And only one group, in the couple hours we were there, went over to the Tell to even look.
Yeah.
And it is that Tell now that this is what evangelicals don't go there, because they believe the lies of Kathleen Kenyon that this didn't happen. But you can see unmistakable proof throughout the entire Tell. A burn lair in the late Bronze Age, which was when Joshua would have fought the Battle of Jericho.
Don't we want to get you in front of the camera?
They know what I look like.
I know, but they're not saying that.
That's okay. That's
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
I think they like, you know.
Okay.
So, as we were coming over here, the apartment we're staying in is on the other side of the old city. And the traffic was a nightmare. There are helicopters flying around, practicing landings. Streets are blocked off. I don't know how long it'll take us to get back to the apartment, which can't be much more than a mile or so away. I guess I would guess.
Couple miles.
Yeah,
couple miles.
About 3. Yeah.
And it's because President Trump is coming.
In fact, you can see where he's going to stay. It's there's some cranes on the horizon over there, and there's a kind of a golden building where one of the cranes is, and that's the King David Hotel.
Okay. So there's a tall building to the left, white building, and then you go a little bit further to the right, and you see the crane, and then that's the King David Hotel. And Brian was sharing with us on the way. What you were saying, that the King David Hotel could withstand a missile attack?
No, he's staying in a suite, reportedly, a specially reinforced suite that supposedly can withstand a missile attack. Yeah, and they even say the whole thing could collapse, and apparently the suite would drop like a rock. And said he might break a few bones, but you would live through it. So that's where Trump is going to be.
So you haven't heard much from Bill Koenig. So Bill is a White House correspondent. He's in Jerusalem for the Trump visit. He'll be here tomorrow. Tell us a little bit about what's going to happen and the significance of it, what you think is, and how it relates to Bible prophecy.
Well, it's been a unique trip, primarily because President Trump and his people thought that it would be advantageous to go to Riyadh first for 2 days and 2 nights and meet with the Saudi leaders, Saudi king, and then leaders of the GCC, which are the Sunni countries that border the Persian Gulf.
13 countries, I believe.
No, the GCC is about 6 or 7.
13 Sunni countries were having their leaders come, I believe.
There's going to be 50. He's going to meet with 50 Muslim leaders. So it'll be the Sunni leaders, but 50 Muslims. That's who's been invited.
And he's on sort of a monotheism tour, I guess, is one way you could.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's the purpose is to develop. The rumor has been to develop an Arab NATO to stand up against Iran, which has been the greatest threat to the Sunni countries in the Middle East as well as Israel. And the purpose of, matter of fact, yesterday they signed a $110 billion first-year deal with the Saudis to provide military equipment. I think it's going to be 349 million, or 349 million.
Not billion?
Not billion. No, I'm sorry, you're right. 340. I get the millions, billions, and trillions mixed up. Yeah, 349 billion over 10-year deal, which is just a lot of military equipment. And the bottom line is President Trump's defense team understands, as well as Israel, as well as the Sunni, as well as the Saudis, that the number one threat to all of them in the Middle East is Iran, and they have to be dealt with. So that's the second stop is here in Jerusalem for a couple days to meet with Netanyahu, Abbas, to talk peace, and to visit some holy sites, Western Wall, Church of the Sepulchre, and possibly a major square in Bethlehem. And then head on to the Vatican and talk with the Pope there about Middle East peace, the plight of Christians throughout the Middle East, persecution, and ways that they can work to help stop the slaughter of Christians and Catholics throughout the Middle East. So it's a very interesting trip. It's very unique because it does stop at the center of Sunni Islam, which is 80% of the 1.5 billion Muslims of the world, probably about a billion, and then the Judeo-Christian home of Israel, and then going to the Vatican, which is about a billion Catholics worldwide. So that's the purpose of the trip. It will be fascinating to say the least, and obviously the
And they could ship some of China's goods. But if they do that, they're taking business from Russia.
Let's start this over because
Yeah.
this is a fascinating conversation. So the president's going to be here tomorrow. We have all of this. Jerusalem is essentially being locked down. I know from being up in the West Bank over the past few days, Judea and Samaria, more technically, that Area A is pretty much locked down, at least to the north of Jerusalem. Jericho was okay getting in and out of, but Nablus was totally locked down. We had to negotiate our exit from Nablus, where Shechem is, ancient Shechem. We had to negotiate our way through a checkpoint, and because we were Americans, we were able to get out there. There were a lot of Palestinian cars and vehicles there, and there was a shooting up there around Nablus. A Jewish settler fathered 9 people, which is not uncommon up in the Jewish settlements. Had shot and killed a Palestinian. He was stoning, hundreds of Palestinians were stoning his car. And the Palestinian press, interesting, was like, Jewish settler opens fire on group of Palestinians. And the truth was hundreds of them were stoning all the cars on this road near Nablus up to one of the Jewish settlements in the West Bank. So I apologize for the noise in the back. This is a very busy area, a lot of tourist groups, and there's some Palestinian school children, I think, behind us.
No, they're Hebrew.
Hebrew? Okay.
Very Hebrew.
Okay. I'm not looking, so the foreign languages all sound alike to me. And so, Brian, you were mentioning that you were seeing some things about the new Silk Road, essentially.
Yeah, I think what's shaping up on the world stage right now is beginning to bring end-time events into focus. And one of the key things that's bringing it into focus is what China is doing. China's off the radar for a lot of us in the West, but China is right in the middle of a major development of something they called one road, one route, one road thing, where they're building an economic highway from China, and the road goes straight into and through Tehran. It goes just to the north of Syria. It goes into Turkey, and from Turkey into Europe, yes? And they've got a railroad now that's doing it. They want to ship goods.
High-speed
And
rail.
all of these people all of the nations along the way are hoping to participate in this economic boom because it makes a lot of sense. And then they've got a belt of a shipping lane that goes around the south and goes on up through the Suez Canal and delivers goods then by the Mediterranean up into Europe. And so this is a trillion-dollar thing that China is developing right now, and it's all of the countries around the world and this side of the world are involved with this thing. Well, I think it makes sense then why Putin came to Syria, about 2 years ago.
yeah, one of the reasons, definitely.
He's certainly one. Yeah, maybe certainly not the only one, but
it
puts him right in the middle of that economic highway coming from China. Because right now, this road, so-called road, this rail, it has a spur that goes up into Moscow, but it's not a direct thing, yeah? And so in order to be right in the middle of this new economic highway that China is developing, Putin has positioned himself and his country, right where that highway is going to be taking place.
And so to give you geographically, from here in Jerusalem to Damascus, Syria is...
Well, by
120 miles.
as the bird flies, and it would take about
4 days to get across the border.
Well, 3 or 4 hour drive by car, not counting the borders.
Yeah, and so that's where the Golan Heights is. But yeah, this is why I think Putin came down. Bill, you're in the White House, and to be honest with you, I have not turned on the news, the TV, or looked at the news for the last 3 days. And I still haven't. This is probably the least prepared I've been in a week to do a prophecy update. But what's going on in Washington? It sounds crazy. What do you think?
Well, part of it's distraction, obviously. As far as Trump's challenges, the Democrats refuse to believe that Trump won fair and square. And they're just having a tough time even acknowledging the fact that he was the president. That's number one. Second, I noticed when he gave lifeline to a boss Palestinian leader, as my Eye to Eye book writes about, all of a sudden things became even more disruptive than normal. And when he started talking about peace deals and possibility of freezing the construction and trying to bring the Israelis and Palestinians together for the purpose of peace, things got even more challenging. And
so you think there's a connection between Trump seeming to embrace the two-state solution and that type of thing?
Yeah, it gets back to the cause and effect. It started with Bush's father, and then Clinton and Bush, who birthed the two-state plan, and then Obama and his efforts, which I'm updating the book right now, and then Trump. I mean, I've watched his first 120 days. Obviously some of the things he are self-inflicted, but at the same time, the intensity of what has happened the last couple of weeks has been directly at the same time as they've been planning this big trip to Riyadh and then to Jerusalem and then to Rome, to the Vatican. So I definitely think there's something to that.
Well, this is Bible prophecy really unfolding in
No
front of our eyes.
doubt.
This is the eternal conflict, that where that dome is, that golden dome over there, is sort of the epicenter of the conflict of the ages, the battle between God and Satan. I don't know how else to describe it.
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and Pam and I, we've been blessed the last few days to have Joel Kramer, a phenomenal biblical archaeologist. We would say he's an archaeologist rock star. He's done numerous digs through there. He took us to sites. The interesting thing is we went up into what they call the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. We went to Hebron, went to the no man's land at Hebron, and at the Cave of Machpelah, we were there with a few other tourists. At Mamre, which is where Abraham met with Yahweh, a documented historical site. There's no question but that this is where Abraham met with Yahweh, is where he pitched his tent, and he was told that he would have a son, and through that son he would be the father of many nations. That happened at Mamre, where Sarah laughed at the promise of God because she was 90 years old. She was past her time to have children. Where at Cave of Machpelah, where Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah are all buried, that Abraham, his first purchase of land in this country, when he was called here by God. And then up in the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria, site after site that we went to where actual things, Shechem, Shiloh, Samaria, we went to these sites. They're in areas difficult for tour groups to get to, no doubt. But nobody was there. It was just Pam and I and our guide. It was shocking. Jews are forbidden to go there. There's this concerted effort to wipe out the memory of the Jewish people. We know that this is prophetic. It ramped up in 1948 when the Jewish state was established. The Jewish state of Israel was reestablished. And I think it's only going to get worse. And I fear that President Trump is sort of playing into it. Don't you see that, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really interesting right now, John, I mean, all the presidents have had a prophetic final day role. But what's interesting about Trump is he's dealing with the major issues. Okay, Iran's a problem. It's identified as a problem, and they're going to do something about it. Bush didn't. Clinton didn't. Just kind of like dirt under the rug. It's kind of. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question. So what's he going to announce? There's a lot of speculation as to what his speech. I read 3 or 4 or 5 articles, and Brian, I'm sure you've done the same thing because you post a lot of news headlines, just like Bill posts a lot of news headlines. You need to look out Jerusalem Journal. And what's your website?
JerusalemJournal.net.
And then watch.org with Bill Koenig, and get Bill's weekly update. Get his book Eye to Eye, which will explain the historical analysis of a lot of this. So I pick up all these news sources, and every one of them says, oh, Trump will do this. He'll announce a move at the embassy. He'll declare Jerusalem the capital. What do you think he's going to do?
Well, the embassy is not going to be moved right now because King Abdullah, President Sisi from Egypt, I'm sure he's heard the same thing in Saudi Arabia, that it would not be a good idea to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. I think that he's still committed to that. Mike Pence said that. this last week. Trump administration says he has, but it's not going to happen right now because they believe that this would affect Trump's desire to make peace between the Israelis and Palestinians. So
it's like everybody wants to make peace, and
it's elusive.
We all know
every president,
but we all know that this is going to happen prophetically.
Well, we
right?
do know eventually there will be a peace deal. The question is, when will that Daniel 9:27 peace deal be done? Before the Lord takes the church or after? I don't know, but I think that there is no greater role. If you look at prophecy, you don't see the United States in a big way in prophecy, but there's no greater role than the United States has had in accelerating final day prophetic events. We have a very significant role. And right now, with this position with Iran, with our dialogue with Russia, we're basically telling Russia, you can join us, U.S., Israel, Sunni coalition, or you can continue to stay with Iran and Syria. They're really giving Russia a chance right now. And
well, I think Putin is in a very difficult position
absolutely.
because he has a major Sunni problem in his country.
Mm-hmm.
He's thrown in with the Shias. I've read that 25% of Moscow is Sunni Islamic.
Yeah, and there's even studies that say by 2030 that over half the Russian military will be Muslims.
I think look, and we talk about the collapse of Europe and the Sunni, and let's call it a Sunni invasion of Europe that's been underway.
30 million plus.
And whatever numbers, the demographic collapse of Europe, whatever numbers there are, they say 2050, it's going to happen decades sooner because of this, the high birth rates among the immigrant populations and that type of thing. I just want to say a few things. You need to come here, if possible. You will learn so much about the Bible. When we were in Hebron, driving through no man's land between the Jewish and Palestinian areas, the thing that smacks you in the face all over this land is the division and security fences. And somebody's going to come on the scene with a big enough ego to think he's going to be able to solve this intractable problem. As you drive up through the biblical heartland, you go through massive miles and miles and miles of mountains that all have been terraced for farming. The evidence of the long occupation of Jewish people in this land and the ancient nature of this land is everywhere you see. One word, there's two guys that did a lot of building here that I think did a good job of memorializing holy sites. Herod built, and they would build on sites and there's people remember traditions here, and they remember places almost unlike any place on the earth. And because they built one layer on top of another. So Herod chose 3 sites to memorialize. One was Mamre, where Abraham got the blessing and the promise of Isaac. The second place that he built, Herod, and you can still see probably better than anything on the Temple Mount today, the Herodian construction at Machpelah is mind-blowing and still exists 2,000 years later. Through earthquakes and everything, these walls are intact. And that's where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their wives are buried. At least Leah, Jacob's wife, is buried there. Rachel's buried elsewhere. Bethlehem, where Brian lives. And he also built at the Temple Mount. And he massively enlarged the temple there. And then Constantine came on the scene about 325 AD. And with him and somewhat his mother, Helen, or Helena? Was it Helen or Helen? Helen, we'll call her Helen.
It's easier.
And they went through, and they were able to identify sites that I think are documented to this day. And Constantine had a thing to do to establish the truth of Christianity. And we can argue about his role and all this and how strong our Christianity was and all that. That's irrelevant, but give him credit for documenting 4 places as holy by building churches there. One, Mamre, the same place that Herod built. That the promise of the coming Messiah. Number 2, he built at Bethlehem to document the birth of Jesus Christ. Number 3, he built the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which, if you look at the Golden Dome and you go to your left, I thought I had it in mind. Is that the large dome there?
Mm-hmm. That's not the dome, but the whitish steeple.
Okay.
There. Yeah.
Just sort of looks like it's just inside the city wall from here. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus was crucified, buried, rose again. And then also up on the Mount of Olives, where Jesus ascended. And we know that he will someday stand there again. Up in the Palestinian areas of Judea and Samaria, Shechem, Shiloh, Ai, Bethel, all sites that you can go and stand on. But unfortunately, the thing that was shocking to Pam and I is we were the only ones there with our guide. Nobody goes there. Jews are forbidden, but the evangelical churches don't go. And so this is my concern, that evangelical tours sort of bypass the historical heartland of the Jewish people. And we're losing touch with the history and truth of the Bible. So what the textual critics did to tear apart the text so we don't believe the text is true, biblical archaeologists, and I put biblical in scare quotes, biblical archaeologists, they do the same thing with the evidence in the rocks and stone and tells and history that can be dug up all over this land. And they have the same agenda: wipe out the evidence of the Jewish people from history. And we know that that Temple Mount over there someday will be the focal point of the final prophetic scenes of human history. There'll be a temple there. It'll be desecrated. And Jesus warned everybody in the environs of Jerusalem, when you see that happen, what do? Get out of town and flee. And it's a stunning thing. I mean, I don't think that I've ever been more convinced that these things are on the cusp of unfolding. It's sort of like when a new factory opens in the U.S., they have a big ceremony when the factory opens. But that's not the whole story. The factory had to be built over a number of years, and the foundations put in place. And so that's what I see happening prophetically, is all the stuff is being put in place. And
you could even argue the foundation is there.
Right.
It's already built. It's ready to go.
Yeah, and then the geopolitical thing, you have the China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, Syria, all of these nations mentioned in Bible prophecy, Egypt. It all converges and finishes right here. Right over there. I'll point to it. Right over there. In that area. In that area just below the Temple Mount, where it's not well known because the truth is suppressed. They found, in the city of David, they found the tomb of David. 9 royal tombs. There's no question in the people who believe the Bible that that was the tomb of David. And we know that the son of David is going to be coming back
soon. And in fact, you can see where he's going to land, according to Zechariah, on top of the Mount of Olives. And according to Zechariah, that ridge to the right of the Temple Mount, where you see the 3 towers, is going to split. And I think when you're over there, you can actually see where that split is likely to take place. It's kind of a geographic fault where a road goes up the Mount of Olives.
And a river will flow down through the valley.
This valley that we see right in front of us. It's going to flow right down where the Arab village is and wind its way, biblically, and according to the Bible, it's going to wind its way toward the Dead Sea.
And the Dead Sea will have life in it again.
Yeah, and what's interesting is there must be a humongous aquifer of water underneath the ground here for that to actually take place. And so when when Yeshua returns and he touches down and that mountain splits, it's going to release this reservoir of living water. Apparently, it's flowing. It must be a vast underground system.
Well, Ezekiel
of water.
describes him. Ezekiel describes, walking through the river, and I'm up to my knees, I'm up to my waist, my armpits. Of this, it's hard to believe. I mean, it's so dry here. I know you were excited the other day, Brian. I saw you post on Facebook. It's raining in Jerusalem.
Well, it drizzled.
Yeah, I know. We were up at AI. We could see the clouds and everything, and we got a few raindrops. And I was joking with our guy, Joel. I said, he has a car that you would best describe as a beater in America. And because he says if it looks like this, nobody will steal it. And we know it's true. Their codes, I have a code for the rental car parked up behind me. And I asked him sort of a question like, now, Joel, I'm not making any comment on the condition of your car, but do they have car washes in Israel? So, but to me, I mean, Brian, how many years have you lived here?
5 years.
Okay, and Bill, this is, you said, I think last night, your 28th trip. So we were walking through Jerusalem on the way to dinner. We ran into Mike Huckabee and Mike Evans, had a nice little chat with them. A lot of people here. Jerusalem Day is May 24th, Wednesday.
Yeah.
And Trump will be here tomorrow. This place it'll be pretty much impossible to get in or out of Jerusalem.
This will be an interesting place when he comes. You'll be able to see all the helicopters and all the activity over Jerusalem, all the security activity.
So he used to go to the Wailing Wall, which would be to the western wall of the Temple Mount, which would be to the left of the Golden Dome. Then he's going to go over where that steeple is, to the left of the white dome that you can see there on the almost just below the top of the horizon there. And he's supposed to go there and do some other things. I hear he's going to Yad Vashem. I think they're keeping a lot of it secret, like you said.
It says Yad Vashem right now. The official schedule says Yad Vashem.
Yeah, he'll do that.
Has he ever been here before?
68. Well, not 68. He 86, I think it was.
Okay.
For some real estate, they looked at it as a real estate oriented. It was just a quick trip.
I would just encourage people, if you can, to come. It's hard on a tour to get up into the areas where we go because of insurance and security, and some places you have to have a bus with bulletproof windows, and it's very expensive. We went into Nablus. We came out. We had to negotiate our way out of the checkpoint because they had Area A completely locked down. But fortunately, we're Americans, and they either think we're stupid or lost, and then we're allowed to get out of these places. But just come if you can. You will see not only Bible history, but Bible prophecy. Let me close with this, if I still have some time left. I have a new camera, so we're trying this out. When we were in Samaria, in 721, around 721 AD, the Assyrians under Sennacherib came down to devastate the land. They came in, they burned. Sennacherib claims, it's probably true, 46 cities. They knock down the walls, they pile trees, and a lot of these trees, the other thing you don't need to know is at the time of the conquest, the trees, the landscapes that you would see here and from the Herodian were covered with a forest. It's disappeared over time, so it didn't quite look like this. But they would cut the trees down, they'd throw them in there, they'd set them on fire. And you see burn layers at all the sites that they've excavated. But Samaria it was very high up on a hill, very high fortified walls. It took Sennacherib 3 years. But during that invasion, thousands of people from the 10 northern tribes made their way to the south. They fled to the south. They knew what was coming. And they came down here at the time of Hezekiah, right? And Hezekiah actually extended the city. It's a little bit of a dip there, but he built on the western hill. And that city became like a giant sheepfold where the remnant of all of Israel was preserved. They were scattered to the nations, and now they've come back. But they were preserved in that sheepfold. This is prophetic. This is what's going to happen when someone demands worship of himself there on that Temple Mount, a man possessed by Satan, we know as the Antichrist. The history of the land of Israel is a picture of the future prophecy of this place. And we seem to be at a time where if we live much longer, we're going to see it unfold. You guys agree?
Absolutely.
So we're going to turn it off right now, and I'll try to do a little more updates if I have time during the rest of the week here. Brian and Bill, thanks so much,
Thank you,
and appreciate so much you were here.
Great to be with you. Thanks,
Okay.
John.
God bless.